Well, hello everyone. This is Don Smith. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Lens. Today I'm pretty excited. This is going to be a two-part series that I'm doing with my guest, Mr. Ron Modra. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Don. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For those of you that don't know Ron, I really highly encourage you to stick with us during these two episodes. Ron was, how many years at Sports Illustrated were you a staff photographer, Ron?
Got almost 27, I believe it was.
Yeah, and how many covers?
Over 70.
Over 70, of which you're seeing one here. Kind of funny the way Ron and I got to know each other. Maybe we can talk about it in a little bit, but it was a story on Barry Bonds when he came over to the San Francisco Giants. Ron was working the story, and we'll get into it maybe a little bit later, but I ended up getting the cover. He ended up getting the credit. It was a picture I would have thrown in the trash can, but it's a story for another day. So what we want to do today, I want to do this interview in two parts with you, Ron. And today we want to take a look at Ron Modra and his incredible sports work. And then part two, which is going to run in a week from today, is going to be all about how Ron made a transition from being one of the greatest sports photographers in the history of anywhere in the world, in my opinion, honestly, into doing landscape photography and teaching workshops. And he's going all over the world. That's going to be part two. So Ron, again, welcome to the show. I want to turn it over to you, and I'll maybe throw some questions in as we go here.
Okay.
But the floor is yours, buddy. Take over.
Well, it's actually a pretty remarkable story, Don. I started out in the Milwaukee area, as a young cub photographer, trying to get some stuff published. I was out of the Army, and I just kind of decided that I wanted to, I decided I was going to pursue photography as a career. I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. So what I did was I just started shooting some small sporting events, and I eventually started to get a few pictures published locally. And then one day I bumped into another photographer, just didn't know him, and we became kind of friendly. And he told me he was doing some work with the Milwaukee Bucks. And so I thought, wow, that would be really cool if I could get in and shoot at least maybe a game or two with the Bucks. And so he was able to talk to the public relations director, a guy named John Steinmiller, who I owe an awful lot to, and so I got a credential for one game, and then I just kept bugging John about, can I shoot a couple more games? And so what I did was I got another game and another game, and then I was giving the Bucks all the pictures, for the programs and that sort of thing, and I was getting some more things published, with the Bucks. And then so finally John said one day, he said, hey, look, he said, I'm just going to give you a season credential. And this was like in the very early 70s, I believe it was. I'm not sure the exact date, but anyway, I started shooting the Bucks for a season or two, and then how fate lends its hand. I was in the press room at the Milwaukee Arena, and a gentleman comes up to the table and he says to myself and this other photographer, he said, "Hey, look, I'm starting a publication, a newspaper, strictly on the Milwaukee Bucks, and I need some images, but I don't have any money." So it's kind of the typical story.
Yeah.
But my friend goes, he said, "Well, I'm not doing that. I want to get paid." And so I just sat there and I thought for a moment. I said, "Hey, look, you know what? I want to continue to get published." So I said, "Look, man, I'll do it. I don't care about the money. I'll help you out with the pictures." Well, by doing that, about 2 or 3 months later, I get a call from the Milwaukee Brewers, the baseball team in town. And the public relations guy said, "Hey, look, I've seen what you're doing with the Bucks." He said, "I'm looking for a team photographer." And I said, "Yeah, I definitely be most interested in doing it." So I went down, we had a meeting. The money wasn't barely enough to pay for film and processing, but I said, "Look, I'll take that job." So I took that job with the Milwaukee Brewers, and it was the best thing I ever did, because I was working there, and then I was chugging along as the team photographer, doing all the action, doing some portrait stuff, and then I believe it was 1974 or 1975. I believe it was 74. Hank Aaron gets traded from the Atlanta Braves back to Milwaukee because he wanted to finish his career with in Milwaukee with the Brewers. So um, that was just a real kind of a turning point because when Aaron got traded back, a photographer from Sports Illustrated was assigned to the story, legendary photographer Herb Scharfman. Herbie was a real character. He worked for Sports Illustrated, also was the team photographer for the Dodgers at that time. So Herbie comes to town, and it's my job to kind of lead him around, show him how to where the photo positions were, access to the clubhouse, introduce him to Aaron, that sort of thing. Well, lo and behold, Herbie doesn't like to drive, so now I have to go to the Pfister Hotel in downtown Milwaukee, and I have to pick up Herbie for the next 4 days, bring him to the stadium, and then take him back to the hotel at night. Well, Herbie and I hit it off like right away. Herbie was a great guy. I really liked him, and I always really respected what his work. He did great baseball work. He was really well known for his boxing photography, and so like day number 3 when I'm with him and we've been spending a lot of time together, I said, "Hey, look, Herbie, I know you probably get this all the time, but you know, would you at least take a look at my work and tell me if you think I'm on the right track, if I have what it takes?" I said, I've really set a goal to work at Sports Illustrated. But I said, if you think that it's not there, then I'll just stay as the team photographer the next 40 years. And so Herbie said, I'd be more than happy to go. Well, you take a look at it. And you know what, kid? Yeah, I think there might be something there. Not bad, kid. Call me next week. And so I called him next week, and then he said, "Look, I talked to John Dominus and I talked to some other people at the magazine, and so I said, send your stuff in, and they're going to have a look at it." Well, I didn't even have a portfolio, so what I did is I just boxed up some slide sheets and some black and white prints that I'd shot, and I sent them off in an old Kodak print box, paper box, and I sent it off. And about a week or so later, I got a note back from Don Delaquanti, who was the deputy photo director there next to John Dominus, and there was a note in there. I wish I would have saved it. It said, "Hey, nice work. Don't call us. We'll call you." And so that was really kind of the start of it. And then I actually became relentless. I was calling all the time, and then a year went by, 2 years went by, and then nothing. They just kept telling me, "Hey, look, you're on the list. If something comes up, we'll throw it your way." Well, nothing came up until I think they actually started to get tired of hearing from me, and so finally, one of the deputy photo editors, a girl named Laurel Frankel, finally called and said, "Hey, look, I have a small assignment for you in Milwaukee. It's a little black and white shot of Rick Langford. The Oakland A's are coming into town, and I need a shot for they were running these black and white columns in the back of the magazine. It was Baseball's Week."
I remember
And so
those. Yep.
that was my first assignment. And the Oakland A's came to town, and I went in, I introduced myself to Rick, told him what I was doing. And I'm telling you something, for one picture, I worked this poor guy to death. And so that was my first picture that was published in the magazine. And then it kind of took off from there. I started to do, I was doing Baseball's Week. If it was in the Midwest, if it was in Chicago or Milwaukee, because I could drive down to Chicago, I was working down, and so I was doing that Baseball's Week. Nothing major, just that picture at the back of the magazine. So I kind of kept chugging along, and things were, they were progressing. And so finally, John put me on my first major assignment, and it was of George Brett. They were doing a picture of story on George. George was in pursuit of batting 400, and so they sent him on. And fortunately for me, George had come through Milwaukee a number of times with the Kansas City Royals, and so I actually knew him a little bit. So it really made things a lot easier when I went to Kansas City to work with George, and he was just really, really great. So I got a lot of stuff that I needed on George, but they still wanted one more portrait of George. And so the Kansas City Royals were going to New York. So John, which was like a thrill for me, John says, "Hey, look, I want you. You're working on the story. I want you to come out and do a portrait of George for us at Yankee Stadium." So I did, and that was like the real start. Then John started to use me on a few more things and a few more things, and so I started to, kind of, uh, get some a little bit more better sense. Everything that I was doing at that point was pretty much strictly on the baseball beat, and so I would say that it was probably another year or so, and then one day John called me and said, "Hey, look, I'd like you to come out to New York for a couple of days. I'd like to talk to you." And, and you got to remember one thing. For those of you that don't know who John Dominus is, John was a legendary Life magazine photographer, one of the greatest photographers that worked there. John could do everything, from food to sports, features, everything. And so I was a huge, huge admirer of John's. And so John brought me out to New York, and he said, "Look, I want to take you to lunch." And he took me to lunch, and I kind of knew what was going to happen, but I didn't. I didn't want to get my hopes up too high. John said, "I want to bring you on board on contract," and so that was late 1978, early 1979, something like that. And so that was the start of my career at Sports Illustrated. So I know it was a little windy story, but I didn't want to leave anybody out. So
No, that's cool. That's cool.
that was part of it. That's how
Yeah.
by doing something for free. And I preach this to a lot of photographers that I've come in contact in the last 40 years or more, that don't turn anything down. Don't ever turn a chance to get published. I know it's hard these days because there's not a lot of uh, there's not a lot of publication to get published in. But if you have an opportunity to get some of your image published, do it. Don't turn anything down.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, let's get started here, and take a look at some of your work.
Okay.
Now, again, as we said today, this is all going to be focused on Ron as a sports photographer. And I know Ron gives out kudos to other photographers, but I'm telling you, gang, this is one of the most talented photographers I've ever had the
Thank
pleasure
you.
to be around. And I've learned a lot and expanded what I know about photography and what I look at shooting, just because of some of the tidbits and listening to what this guy has to say. So,
Okay. Well.
Ron,
Okay.
turn it over to you. And
Okay, Don. The first image we have up here is a cover shot.
cover shot of Billy Sims. Whoops, we just go back.
Just lost Billy. Okay, hang on a second. Let me try to see if I can get back to. Okay. Oh God. Okay. Are we recording?
We are recording.
Okay. Here we.
Go ahead, or you can start on this one.
Okay.
There you go. We got Billy.
People always ask. When you. Well, first off, the first question is, did you do the swimsuit shoot? Which I did not. I wish I would have had a great opportunity to do it, but I didn't. But this was my very first cover, and so it was in 1980. John had sent me, and fortunately for me, I shot this cover in the old Milwaukee County Stadium. The Lions were playing the Packers, and they wanted. They were doing a cover story on Billy Sims. And so when people say, "Hey, of all the covers, what's your favorite?" I always say my most favorite cover was my first one, because if I would have never got another cover after this, I could have been very happy with saying, "Look, I did a cover for Sports Illustrated." And so this was my first one, and I was working with John Iacono and Heinz Klutmeyer were the other photographers assigned to it. Kevin Fitzgerald was the editor for the football, and so I shot the game. I hustled over to the sideline at one point, and I started to shoot these portraits of Billy. And Kevin called me the next day, late in the afternoon, and he said, "Hey, I want to just tell you, you did a great job." They used 6 pictures I got 5 of them on the inside. And he said, by the way, you got the cover. And I thought, oh,
Wow.
this is just like,
That's a lot. For those of you who don't, when you have 3 photographers on a game, and the stature that those people are, yeah, to get 6 pictures,
yeah.
you have to be pinching yourself.
It was an incredible feeling. And so it just is like, um, it just like blew me away. And so, John called me and he congratulated me on my first cover and everything. So, and then that was kind of the start. My assignments picked up, and I was able to a lot of different things because I had a bit of a newspaper background. They didn't use me strictly on action, and so I was able to do both feature and and action. So I would do games, and then sometimes during the week I'd get assigned to go and do, a feature story on someone. And I did like. Yeah, like example, I was assigned to do Isaiah Thomas, and so he was a great guy to work with. So I did features with him, and then I said he was from Chicago, so I said, "Hey, look, I'd like to, take you down to the lakefront and do a shot with the skyline in the background." Well, he had just bought this fur coat, so he said, "Well, I'm going to be able to wear this coat because it was." Um, it was kind of a chilly day, and he wanted to do, the fur coat thing. So,
Yeah.
that was kind of a thing that I did was I was able to do both action and portraits. So, uh, you know, I had a great variety of assignments while I was working there.
And
Hey, Doc,
you told me, Ron,
can we stop for a
on,
second?
on one of our many landscape trips we've made, I've heard so many of these great stories, you guys. But you're pretty much self-taught in lighting, and to the point where Sports Illustrated asked you to work with the other staff photographers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I did. Yeah, you know what? I studied a lot of other photographers' lighting, and back in the day, everything was pretty cumbersome of with the lights, and so hauling all this stuff around. So what I started to do is I started to try to become uh, very minimal on the lighting, and I actually really kind of worked on like one light setups, 2 lights, a lot of one light stuff where I would just use like a soft box. I got away from using umbrellas because I thought it spread the light too much, and I started using soft boxes. And I what I ended up doing was, as time went by, I was using smaller and smaller soft boxes so I could get the light more directional, the way I like it, the mood I like. I found out that what I like to do is I always wanted to try to create some sort of a mood with portraits that I was doing, and so I kind of developed that. Other photographers were asking me, how did I light that and that sort of thing. So, and a lot of times when photographers would ask me how I did that, I told them lies. I told them, "6 lights, the bright lights." Oh, it's massive. I'm not sure you're going to be able to do it, but a lot of times it was just like, one and 2 light setups.
Yeah, yeah. Very
Let me see
cool.
if I can find an example of that.
And I'll explain while Ron's looking for a picture. With this recording software, I'm kind of new with it, and we were going through quite a struggle to
Yeah.
get this up. So he's actually looking at 2 screens on his end, one of thumbnails and one of the large image that he can display and you see.
Okay, this is one that I did when Cal Ripken was going for that legendary record of Lou Gehrig. We did this in Yankee Stadium, and so this was really one light. And what I was able to do, there was a little shadow that little shadow that's on his face was created by some lighting that was coming through some trees that were near Monument. Uh, the Monument area there, and again, I used only one light with some warming gels on there to give it that kind of like warm kind of sunset look. And so this was I never tried to really go overboard with lighting. I just found the whole thing way too cumbersome. And again, the lighting a lot of the stuff was, it was heavy. It take a lot of stuff along with you, and so, I used Norman. I don't even know if they manufacture them, but Norman lights were kind of my staple. They were small, they were portable, and and the batteries would run down at the worst possible, times. Like this is the shot I did of Derek Jeter for young Derek Jeter back in the day. And again, I only used one light on this because I was working in the dugout and I didn't have a lot of time. So I just used a one light setup to kind of balance it and get the image to pop like off the sky. One thing that a lot of people don't understand is when a lot of times working with athletes, man, we just didn't have a lot of time with these guys. These were like, 5 and 10 minute shoots. And Don, you did enough sports to, understand, how that stuff worked. Another lighting one was here with Jim Valvano. And this was one where we definitely used multiple lights on this. This was one where we brought the piano in, and the story we were doing on Jim was after they won the national championship. They were doing a story about Coach because he was such a great guy. Actually,
they were North Carolina State. Is that correct?
North Carolina State, yeah. And so I was working with Coach V on the story, and he was like pretty much up for anything. So the longer I was with him, I got this kind of feel that this guy is just such an entertainer. And so my idea was to get him in a white tuxedo, and I had Nike sent me those shoes down special. And so I wanted to have him as the entertainer, and he came down there, and man, we just had a blast. And this was the image that we came out of.
I love that image, Ron.
This was from the Super Bowl with the Redskins, and this is kind of an example of how you really have to stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish. We were assigned certain areas during the Super Bowl, and on this particular game, for 3/4, I think it was almost 3/4, not one play came my way. I had nothing. And so I was really getting frustrated, and I thought, wow, this is just like, it's just not going to happen. And then so all of a sudden, Riggins breaks this run. I think it was like a 43-yard run, and he came right at me. And so this was the picture off that sequence, which became the Super Bowl cover, and it was the only play that came my way the entire day. So I had like a 5 or 6 picture sequence, and it was really basically the only pictures that I made the entire day.
Here's
okay. Now this is one of Don's favorites. Now
I got this hanging in right over my left shoulder here.
I was not would be considered a golf fan or even a golf photographer, and so, but I did the Masters a couple of years in a row, and this, honest to God, it's the only decent golf picture I ever made, and it was of Nicklaus in '86. I believe when he won the Masters.
At 46 years old, I believe.
Yeah, and so I'm telling you, believe me when I tell you this, it's the only decent golf shot I ever shot.
you got the moment. Martina,
one of my favorite subjects. I worked with her a number of times. She was just fantastic. I loved her to death, incredibly cooperative. This was a shot I did of Martina in Paris at the French Open one year. And so, again, a wide variety of assignments that I was able to do. Another one, when I was doing portraits, I was assigned to do a story on Roy Jones in Pensacola, Florida. Went down there, and I walked into the facility where he was working at, and boom, there was that door, the king of the ring, Mr. Roy L. Jones, and it just jumped out. And so this was the portrait that I did of Roy at the gym. They used it as the opener for that particular story. Sugar Ray Leonard, worked with him. Again, this was a portrait that I shot of him that ultimately they used as the cover. Now, again, we used a number of lights on this. On this one, this was not a one light setup. This was probably like probably a 3 light setup with, I believe we use speedotrons on this. And so,
Hey, Ron, a quick question on this. When you would be assigned, let's say you would be assigned a portrait shoot like this and you knew it was for a cover, what would you go to a medium format camera over a 35 mil?
I did
And
a lot of
what
times.
would you use?
I used um, a lot of times I used a 35 millimeter, but I would use Hasselblad a lot.
Mhm.
But the trouble with Hasselblad was that square format,
Yeah,
and sometimes it just did not lend itself to the cover unless you shot it a little bit wider, where they could make a vertical out of that square. This might have been shot on a Hasselblad. I'm not positive.
and
Um,
I know a lot of the younger folks watching this. Uh, you tend to forget that you're working back in the film days. And what kind of film were you using for this?
Well, if time permitted, we would try to shoot on Kodachrome, but most of the time we were shooting on Ektachromes, um, that sort of thing, and obviously we'd shoot Polaroids to test the light, and like when you've got Sugar Ray Leonard standing there in front of you and you shoot a Polaroid, you have no idea how long a minute is.
Yeah,
Well, that thing's developing and he's standing there waiting on you, and again, when you have a limited amount of time, like with Leonard, he was incredibly cooperative, and so you know he was incredibly patient with us. This was a shot, another studio shot with Brett Favre for a story that was called Leader of the Pack, and so did this one in Milwaukee, borrowed a motorcycle from Harley Davidson, brought it into the studio, and Brett Favre was one of these kind of guys you couldn't miss with him. He was always animated, and so this was the leader of the pack.
and this had to be fun for you, knowing that you're a huge Packer fan.
Huge Packer fan, yeah. This was the cover that we just had talked about of Sugar Ray. Um, and then this was one that I was assigned to the World Track and Field Championships in Rome one year. And this was a really unexpected cover because we didn't know what they were going to use as the cover. So they ended up making Jackie Joyner the cover. Now, this was shot from the stands with the 800 millimeter lens.
Wow.
And so this was a very unexpected, cover shot. Well, this was one that, again, another cover where it was for the spring training issue. Benito Santiago. I kind of always had it in mind when I wanted to do a catcher shot like this. And so we shot this. They were training, I believe, in Yuma at the time. And so I told Benito what I had in mind. I hired a cherry picker for the day, got him out there. And this was the cover of the spring training issue for that.
And what were you using? Were you just using the softbox to light them here again?
Yeah, just one softbox.
Mhm.
Just one softbox just for a little fill. And so, um, yeah, it worked out great. This is probably another one of my favorite covers that I did.
This one. It's great.
Another cover that we did for spring training, and a guy that was incredibly fantastic to work with. I worked with Nolan a number of times at Sports Illustrated, and so this was a shot that we did in Port St. Lucie, I believe it was, and it was a little bit windy. And we actually set up a seamless background with this red seamless background, and we were able to hold it together. Nolan threw, I think, about 10 pitches for me. And so this was the cover of that particular issue. Again,
You kind of giggle nowadays because how easy it is in digital to change out backgrounds and things like this. But hey, this was the film days.
yeah, you know what? It was.
What it was.
This was like, when people would see them and say, "Oh yeah, look at that," that back. I had 3 or 4 people in the background holding on to the light stands, Nolan keeping him kind of centered on the thing, and so the thing that Nolan and I always had this great understanding, because when I went to work with Nolan, Nolan knew that I would, when I told him I needed 10 minutes or 15 minutes, he knew that I would keep it to that. Instead of saying, "Oh, you know what? it's going to be a 5 minute shoot, but then they would turn into a half-hour thing. I never really, I never like with athletes. I never lied to them about the fact is that or you know what, it's going to be a 5 minute shoot and then try to turn it into a 45 minute shoot. That stuff just didn't fly. And
No,
so
I completely agreed with that. I did the same thing. I would even tell them, look, I'll take 10 frames, 10 clicks.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if I got to 10, that was it. I stopped.
yeah.
Uh,
This was another cover, another one of my favorite covers, Pudge Rodriguez. Um, I'd covered enough Ranger games, and a lot of times when he made a throw to second base and he threw him out, he got really animated. So I got him into the bullpen and I had to put a black background up there. I think it was like some velvety kind of thing, so there was no reflection on the light. And got him to. I said, "Hey, let's work with me, baby." And so we got a great cover. We got a great cover out of it.
that is.
Yeah.
Oh, this was awesome.
Now this is another example of things that you could do digitally today that you couldn't do back in the day. This was the great Bonnie Blair, and we set up lights in the area where she was training, and we had the velvety background black, so it absorbed all the lights. We had a light out front, and then we had some low light tungsten lighting that was at camera level. And so what we were able to do is Bonnie would come by and the tungsten light would streak, and then boom, we'd hit the main light and she would freeze her. So this was all done in the camera. This was not anything that was done. Well, there was no Photoshop or anything back in the day, but these were the kind of things that we had to go in there, and there was a thought process. I'd like to do the blur image of Bonnie, and so went in there, ran some tests before Bonnie got there, and then again, she was great. I don't remember exactly how many times she skated by me, but she came by, and again, not every one of them turned out perfect, but this one was the pick of the ones that we did of Bonnie. And again, this was all stuff that was done on film in the camera. This was way pre-digital days. Oh, here's our friend.
Oh, speak of our buddy. There he is.
Barry Bonds. This was before the trade, when he was a slim down young Barry. I shot this in Wrigley Field. I don't think this was a Barry Bonds assignment. I'm almost positive one. This was just one where, I was just shooting the players as they were coming to bat and that sort of thing. And a young Barry. Okay, this is another shot that really came about. I was in Calgary. I was actually on my way to Calgary to do some pre-Olympic stuff for the Calgary Olympics. And so I was on the plane and I was sitting next to some people from ABC Sports. And so we just got to chatting. And they said, yeah, we're going to be doing some preliminary film work, and we're going to be working on the bobsled run. So as we were talking, I said, wow, I said, you know what? Would it be possible for me to possibly mount a remote on the front of the sled for one of the runs? And the guy said, well, yeah, I don't see why not. Do you have all the stuff you need with it? I said, I don't, but I said I could probably get everything I needed sent up from New York. So I called Mel Levine in the Stockholm. I said, hey, Mel, I might have an opportunity to do a pretty cool picture at the bobsled run. So Mel sent me up the magic arms and zip wire. Now again, all of this stuff had to be, wired, mounted at the front of the sled, wire run, zip cord running into the sled, and then the camera, not the camera, but the director says, would you like to go down on the sled and run it yourself? And I said, I don't think so. And so
who's tripping the camera? Are you doing it?
No, Brakeman is doing it.
Brakeman's tripping.
So I set it up with a 20mm lens. And so they were going to do 3 runs down the bobsled thing. So I watched the run, and I knew where I wanted the shot to come from. So I set it up, I ran it through there. And so I told the brakeman, when you get to that turn, just rattle off a bunch of frames. Everything was pre-focused, exposure was set, everything. So he's coming down, and so they did run number one. I asked him how it went. He said, "Hey, I think it went pretty well." I was able to watch it on a monitor, so I knew exactly where he was and where I wanted him to be shooting. So they did the second run. Again, this is on film. I'm putting the roll of 36 in there, taking the one out, putting the film back in. So they come back and they're going to do one more run. And the guy says, "Hey, Ron, do you want to reload and do another one?" I was 99% sure that I had the picture that I wanted. And I said, "Yeah, what the heck? The camera's all mounted. Everything's ready to go. Let's do another run." So I load it up and I'm watching on the monitor. And then all of a sudden, I'm watching in the turn and things seem to be going a little bit sideways. And so I thought, something doesn't seem right here. Well, the monitor shuts down, and then all of a sudden, here comes the sled back in with my camera hanging and dragging in the snow. Uh, the lens is shattered, the arm is shattered, everything is all broken. And the driver goes, "Man," he said, "I'm really sorry. I got a little close to the wall on that run." Like your camera. And so I had it. Uh, but we already had the picture in the well, and this was they use this as a double truck opener on the for the Olympic magazine. So this is just another example of I wasn't just on the baseball beat or the football beat. I was so lucky that I was able to do just an incredibly wide variety of, assignments. We already talked about the Cal Ripken shot, the Derek Jeter shot. This came from which was my favorite assignment that I ever did from Sports Illustrated. This one came a little later on, where I went to Siena, Italy, to cover the Palio, which is an absolutely amazing event. It's a 3-lap horse race around the piazza. The whole spectacle that goes with it is fantastic. This is another one. I was in Japan working on a story, and the assistant that I was with, there was the sumo wrestling championships were going on, and so I snuck in there with the assistant, and I captured this shot of during the sumo wrestling championships, which led to another story. I don't think I have any images of it, but I presented a story idea to Sports Illustrated where I actually went to a sumo school, and I documented a story on these sumo wrestlers. Unfortunately, the story got killed, but I just have this image from that trip to Japan. One of the young Cuban boxers on a trip that I did down to Cuba, where I was working with the Cuban Olympic boxing team, and I went over to this gym, and some of these young kids who wanted to be Olympic hopefuls were working out, and I made some portraits of some of these kids that were there, and just fantastic. It's just I get a big kick out of working on when I was working on these stories of just working on some little portraits of these kids, just to show something just away from the action. Another shot from the Palio, just an incredible spectacle that it was. I was at the finish line. I did hockey. Now, I'm no hockey photographer compared to Don Smith, but I would sit up in the stands with my 600 and just shoot through the net and try to see what I could come up with. I'm like, again, wide variety of assignments: football, horse racing. Here was one that was absolutely. I saw this flicker come through the camera, and I thought, "What the heck was that little blank?" And here was a cardinal flew through the.
Oh, I didn't even see that till you pointed it out right there.
Yeah,
I was looking up at the jockeys.
Yeah, and I saw this little red thing go through there. And when I looked at the images, I thought, "Oh my God, a cardinal flew through that! What's the chances of that happening?"
You can't say you put that in through generative AI, can you?
Yeah, I did. Did an assignment on these dog sled races and football and rodeo, Indy 500, track. Now this is another shot where it's, of all the images that I ever did for Sports Illustrated, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite image by any stretch, but it's turned out to be my most famous.
Yeah.
Happened in 1988 at the Olympics in Seoul. Um, Jerry Cook came up to me the morning of the 100-meter finals. Jerry was doing the directing all the assignments for all the events, and so Jerry comes up to me and says, "Hey, Ron, I need you to go to the 100-meter finals, and I'm just, I want one more guy there." And so I just had said to Jerry, I said, "Jerry, there's 9 guys there already, I believe." And I said, "I'm not quite sure, where I could, maybe find a spot." He said, "Hey, Ron, just do me a favor. Go to the 100-meter finals and just make me a picture. That's all I'm asking." And so I went over there and I was walking around, and there was a moat that went around the track. And so I was trying to look for spots. All the other photographers, were all signing these positions. And so I spotted David Burnett from Time Magazine, a friend of mine from New York. I spotted Dave up there, and Dave was kind of sitting. Now, this is hours before the event's going to take place. So I said, "Hey, Dave." And we were just sitting there, and I said, "I guess this is as good a spot as any." We were kind of by ourselves. We were like 10 or 15 meters down the track from the start. And there was really no other photographers about us. Most of them were gathered down farther and by the finish line. So we're sitting there and chatting. And I said, Jerry says, "Just make me a picture." I said, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try a pan shot." And Dave goes, "Have you ever done one before?" And I said, "No, not really." And he says, he said, "Do you really think that the 100-meter finals is a really good time to experiment with doing a pan shot?" And I said, "Hey, there's 9 other guys here, Dave. What do I got to lose?" And so now for the next like 2 hours, I'm driving Dave crazy. What do you think I use for shutter speed? 125 is going to work? And so Dave is going, "Okay, enough already with the pan shot." So now the question is, where's my point of focus going to be? Ben Johnson, Carl Lewis, they were obviously the 2 favorites. Ben was in lane 4, which was right in the middle of the track. And I'd worked with Ben a couple months earlier up in Toronto where he was training. And so um, I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to go with Ben Johnson. Now, you got to remember with a shot like this, when you're doing a pan shot and you're pre-focused with the 300-millimeter lens, if Ben Johnson hadn't been in the front, I would have nothing but mush. There wouldn't have been anything there. So I decided to go with Ben, and the gun went off. They came down. I panned with Ben Johnson, and I actually really thought, wow, I think I got some there. Ben was a little bit out in front, and it looked absolutely fantastic. I believe I got 4 frames off on this thing. And then so they picked up the film. I went on to the rest of my assignments for today. And, and I hadn't really given it much thought for the rest of the day as I was working my other events. And so I got back to the back to the hotel, and I ran into Jerry, and Jerry says, "Oh man, Ron, Jesus, he's really nailed that Ben Johnson shot. Wow." And so I said, "Well, thanks, Jerry." And I hadn't even seen anything yet.
Yeah.
And so Jerry says, "I think you're going to use it as the cover and the opener," which was really unheard of. So it became the cover and the opener. And as the time went on, almost every Summer Olympics, I got a call from somewhere to discuss the Ben Johnson shot. And again, this was done in the camera. I believe I shot it like f4 at 125th of a second with a 300-millimeter lens on a pistol grip. And so,
I remember back in the day, Ron, when this shot came out, and I knew you were good, but I just said, wow, this guy can pull this off on the 100-meter final in the Olympics.
yeah.
He's really good. And this is part of what I love about you. You're so humble. You're telling me, I never did a pan before. I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you and say, like, "Oh man, I've been doing pan shots for
I've been practicing pans all my life." Yeah, they're not easy to pull off.
This was the first one. Another guy that I love to work with, this was Pete Rose. This was for another spring training story. And so they wanted an opener for the spring training issue. And I know Pete. I worked with him a number of times. I know that, there was people that didn't like him, people that loved him, people thought he was a real jerk. Pete treated me great, always cooperative, always on time, and so I went to him and I said, "Hey, Pete, I would want to know if you'd be willing to do this headlong dive for me." And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "I'm kind of under a time crunch." Um, I said, "Can we do it tomorrow?" He said, "Oh God." He said, "No." And this is the way he was. He said, "Oh man, Ron, no way tomorrow." But he said, "I can do it Thursday at 4 o'clock."
Hmm.
And I said, "Great, I'll be here." So went there. It was at the spring training site, Clearwater, Florida, I believe we were at. And so I set up a couple cameras, with multiple lenses on there, a little wider, a little tighter, whatever. And then, you know, so Pete comes and he was right on time. And he goes, "Hey, I played today in the game." So he said, I'm not going to do this slide more than 10 times. And I'm going, I said, "Pete, are you kidding me? 10 times?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's probably all I got in me." He said, "Do you think you can do it?" And I said, "Pete, let's do it one time and let's talk after the slide."
Yeah.
So Pete being Pete Rose, he he goes over to first base. We're on third base. Pete goes over to first base and he said, "Well, let me know when you're ready." I said, "Pete, you don't have to start from first base." "I got to start from first base, Ron. That's all I know." "Okay, let me know when you're ready." Pete comes around full blast. He's running, like his hair's on fire. Boom! He dives into third base. I got the remote switches in my hand. I got 3 or 4 cameras going on. Boom! He slides in. I said, "Wow." I said, "That was really cool, Pete." He said, "Well, let's do another one." And then, so he did a second one. And then I absolutely 100% knew that I had the shot that I wanted. And so I said, "Pete, we're not doing this 10 times." I said, "I know for a fact I got the shot that I want." He said, "Well, let's do one more anyway." And so he was bound and determined to do another one. So we did 3, and this was the shot that came out of it. And so, but
Hey, Ron, we're going to have to, man, I could go with this all day long, but if we can maybe do a couple more and then we'll start to wrap this up.
okay, well, I'll just kind of quickly go through these. Greg Nettles. This was the shot that John brought me to New York for George Brett. This is an Olympic trials. Isaiah, we talked about that. We talked about Coach V, another Dan the Man cover. I did NASCAR, polio, football, sweetness. Now, again, these were all, most of these were shot manual focus, 600 millimeter lens. And then we get into the landscape. So,
Yeah, which we're going to go on to in part 2 here.
yeah. And so it just is, it was an absolutely remarkable career, Don. I feel so blessed. I came from a really small town, and to achieve my goal of working at Sports Illustrated for all those years, and all those different assignments that I was able to do, Olympics, baseball, and just features. I literally traveled around the world 3 times. For a wide variety of assignments. And, I always like to say that, you know, no one gets there by themselves. I had tremendous help along the way with editors, people that believed in me. And so, it's, I always looked at things as a team effort, with my ideas that I wanted to project, their ideas. Sometimes we butted heads on things, on certain things, but by and large, most of the picture editors there, gave me kind of a free reign of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do that. And I really appreciated everything that was done for me along the way. Like I said a minute ago, you don't do these things by yourself. This is um, you you have a team of people that you work with and believe in you, and that's how you get things done, and that's how I got things done. And so I was always very appreciative, and always was more than thankful when people thought I did a really terrific job, or they loved this picture or that picture. That's what's really rewarding, when at the end of the day, and this as well as I do, Don, shooting all the sports that you've done over the years, the reward comes if people appreciate what you've done. And so, yeah, again, it was a remarkable career.
Well,
I just was really blessed.
this has been awesome. And we're going to go on, everyone, to part two, obviously, next Friday. Leave some comments down below. If you have questions for Ron, I will ask him and I'll leave you the answer for him. And I also want to point out, Ron, you've done some terrific. I can't remember if this was back before COVID when my wife Barry and I came into uh, Nashville, where you live, and this was when the Nashville tornadoes hit.
All right.
And took us all out of there on your wife MB's birthday night.
Exactly.
And I want you guys on where on YouTube can they find these videos that you make? Because Ron makes
Yeah, they're on YouTube, just Ron Modra, and I think I did maybe 8 or 10 of them,
yeah,
variety of Sports Illustrated assignments. Uh, they're some of them are pretty funny, and so I think that if you go to them, you might enjoy them. So
no, I think you will. Look, definitely check out the one on Sergey Bubka.
Sergey Bubka, yeah, I didn't even
In Russia.
that's
I
good.
actually have that one queued up for this, but with as many technical problems as we've been experiencing, we're going to leave that for the audience to go search it out on their own. But
Okay,
check that out. He's got some incredible videos.
okay.
So, hey, Ron,
Yes, sir.
anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, hey Don, this has been really a really fun trip down memory lane for me. I really thank you so much for inviting me on your channel, and I hope that the viewers enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. Hey, well, I'd like to thank all of you that hung in there with this. Tell your friends about this, share it. Feel free to share the link on your social media channels. And we hope to see you again next Friday. And we're going to hear the story about how Ron transitioned over from, I can tell you my brief story, and then Ron's story about how we transitioned away from sports and into the world of doing landscape photography, and where you and I really got to know each other.
That's right.
And have been traveling all over the world with our cameras, photographing landscapes. Yeah. So, hey, until next time, everyone, get out there and keep active. And for those of you here in the States, have a fun Thanksgiving weekend, what's left of it. And we'll see you again next Friday.